Good morning and welcome back. In the first segment, entitled Mother Was the Monkey, I made the case of the Earth being settled about 4 million years ago by visitors from, well, not visitors, but a culture from outer space. And this might, of course, might sound like science fiction, but I'd also remind you that we are spending billions and billions of dollars in space exploration. Now, if you go through the history of mankind, you will find that without exception, exploration was always followed by occupation. Why are we investigating the stars above, the cosmos? Why are we looking for Earth-like planets orbiting sun-like stars? So this probably means that we're someday looking forward to being able to travel to the final frontier where no man has ever gone before, and the way we're trashing this planet, it looks like we might be needing to change, but there's a serious doubt whether we can survive that long at the rate we're destroying ourselves and our habitats. Now, if you will recall, the first item of what I believe is proof of this argument is the great dissimilarity between the human species and all other natural, the world's natural creatures. We're very inefficient, we're greedy, arrogant, and stupid, as our over 6,000 years of organized violence clearly shows. And I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to some once famous people that you have probably never heard of. And here they are. Yes, Martin and Osa Johnson were a young couple that in the late 1920s and 1930s traveled around Central and West Africa and the Pacific Islands, making documentary films of the lands, its rainforests, savannas, its creatures, birds and animals that were found there. And of course, from each location differed from the other locations, and they each had their own unique attributes. But there was one thing that was common to all these places that they traveled, and that was the people. They lived what we call a primitive or even a Stone Age existence. Small tribes living in villages, plenty of food available to them. They were hunters, fishermen, gatherers, fruits and vegetables, plentiful supply. And the question was, how did a Stone Age culture survive into these modern times? And it's here that I would cite the evidence, the second bit of evidence that suggests the arrival of the lords of the world, and that is isolation. Because throughout our more than 6,000 year history of organized violence, it is quite clear that a primitive culture only advanced when brought into contact, either through conquest or commerce, with a higher culture. Leave people alone, isolated to themselves, and they will arrive at a level, a comfortable level of existence, and see no need to change it. So the Egyptians learned from the Sumerians, and the Greeks learned from the Egyptians, the Romans learned from the Greeks, and the Etruscans. And so it goes, like a domino theory. Each expanding culture affects and is affected by contact with other cultures that are similarly on an upward path. So, the one thing that historians delving back into these early times always leave out of their equation, and that is human nature. So that if the resistance to change, which is one of our characteristics, is not unilateral. I mean, it's something that we change in order to improve things. And once we have a level of comfortability, then we have a resistance to change. Yet, the history, as we're told, tells us that we evolved into agriculture and settlements. Well, now Homo robustus was on the planet, and this is proto-man, the race from which Mother, who was a monkey, originated. And they were hunter-gatherers for 2 million years before the arrival of the Lords. And ask anyone who has some expertise in the field, and they will tell you that agriculture is actually a science. So there's a lot more to it than poking a seed in the ground and hanging around for 2 or 3 months waiting for it to bloom or blossom. And of course there's pests like locusts and birds that will eat the seeds. And then when they sprout, you have deer and other animals that will come in and eat the shoots before they have a chance to grow. So it really doesn't make any sense that mankind would suddenly decide to settle down and start growing crops, especially when everything they needed was growing all around them. And it's kind of the if it works, don't fix it, because for 2 million years we pretty well got the hang of tracking these herds of game. We knew pretty well where they were going, and we became expert in herbs, roots, berries, edible things separated from the inedible, and there was really no reason to change. But when the Lords arrived here, and if this sounds like science fiction, let me remind you that it would be nice to know that there's hope for our dreams of going off into space ourselves and visiting other planets Oh, not visiting, sorry. Light year is a pretty long way to go just for a visit. But another place to settle, or maybe as Revelation says, that the dragon may be loosed another season. Yeah. Well, it would be probably encouraging to realize that it's already been done. And that these settlements and the introduction of agriculture was introduced by the lords in order to keep these certain subjects that they were going to treat with genetic engineering over the course of, many generations perhaps, in order to form them into a compatible species, such as we are today, that they could use to mate with. There's a curious verse in the first verse of Genesis 4, where we're told that Adam knew his wife Eve, and she got pregnant and bore Cain, and then she says, "I got me a man from the Lord." Well, there is an indication that there was some mating going on there, and we are the unfortunate results of that union and unions like them. Of course, as it pointed out, we have very little in common with the natural creatures of the earth, and a whole lot of characteristics that are rather unbecoming, like our penchant for turning science to the creation of bigger and more terrible weapons with which to kill more and more of our own kind. Just as an interesting statistic, the civilian casualties of World War I amounted to about 15% of all, the entire number. And by the time of the Iraq War, civilian casualties comprised 90% of all the casualties of war. So we are definitely insane, ignorant, stupid, and self-destructive. That is insane. And among the insanities that we have to contend with are those that are introduced by organized religion. I don't want to go into that here, but there's another gentleman out there by the name of Jordan Maxwell, who has spent about the same length of time researching his field as I have mine, and he has some very interesting presentations, and they're over here on YouTube, explaining the origins and the symbolism and the esoteric meaning of the symbols and things that religion has taught us. Like, for instance, as I mentioned in Mother Was a Monkey, there was never anyone by the name of Jesus who lived in Palestine a little over 2,000 years ago, because Jesus is actually the English pronunciation of the Roman nickname Yesu. Yahshua, Joshua, take your pick. And that Anyway, what religion tells us is that this Jesus person is going to come back at the end of the world and judge. Isn't he the same guy that said, "Judge not, lest ye be judged"? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, anyway, as I mentioned in the first presentation, I am an atheist. But it doesn't mean I don't have faith. I just have faith in things that can be proven. This superstitious nonsense, and I don't care if it hurts your feelings. That's your problem, not mine. But the things that you're saddled with, these belief systems, based on ignorance and superstition, are a form of mind control. Now, the religion that I follow is Taoism. It was the teachings of Lao Tzu, who had a very famous student. And this was Confucius. Confucius's teacher. And this religion is called Taoism, and it's the way of life. And what I like about it is that it tells me how to be a better me, an advanced spiritual being, without getting in your hair. Telling you how to live, what to think, how to think, what to say, and giving you a whole bunch of sins that you're not supposed to commit, which are purely subjective. Because what one person considers a sin, another person might not consider there's anything wrong with it. And the lunacy carries itself through in language, the way we use language, and the propagation of evil in the world. Because I submit to you the truth, that truth is good. Because it's always true. If something is true now, not only has it always been true, but it always will be. Reality, on the other hand, is evil because it depends on appearances. What something looks like, what something sounds like, what it appears to be. And of course, we know that all too often, appearances are deceiving. Now, I have to kind of skip around a little bit, but now we've from Genesis, now we're going to jump all the way over to Revelation and discuss the city of heaven, which I believe holds all the requirements that we would look for in a celestial ark. Because now, think about this. If we will, manage to go up to the headwaters of the Amazon and find a Stone Age primitive tribe up there who pulls around on a raft or maybe paddles around a hollowed up tree trunk, and tell them about ocean-going liners, ships that are like floating cities that go across oceans, and they can just stay out on the water for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, because they carry all the supplies with them. So it's sustainability. Well, they probably think you're crazy or something wrong with you because they have not experienced such things. But now, today, we take them for granted. So, if we understand that it's very likely that we might have the opportunity or someday the technology to travel to outer space, the key word would be sustainability. We'd have to take our ecosystem along with us, and it would have to be enclosed. Well, this brings us to the city of heaven, which we're first, are told, that has a wall that is comprised of laminates of a variety of minerals having unique crystalline structures. And each one of these is 20 feet thick, so that the whole wall is 240 feet thick. I don't know of a city anywhere that would need a wall around it 240 feet thick. But when it comes to a cosmic egg, such as the traditions of ancient South American cultures tell us, that their visitors that came down from up there somewhere, who they called the sons of the sun, came from a cosmic egg. Now, you can try this if you like, and I'll guarantee you're going to fail, but go to your refrigerator and get a raw egg and put it in your hand and try to break it by squeezing it. You can't do it. It's a pretty sound structure. And then the fact that it was always daylight in there, so hey, there's some kind of energy going on there, and maybe, just maybe, this surrounding wall that encloses this cosmic egg is an opaque lens that is used to gather energy from the surrounding cosmos. I would suggest that maybe some research could be made into these different materials to investigate their electrical properties and their capacity for energy storage and transfer. Might be interesting. Then, of course, there is the all too famous pearly gates. There is an element that resembles pearl when it's frozen. And that element is oxygen. So it's reasonable to expect that something like a celestial ark, which would have to be built in space, because it would probably be something like 20 miles long and maybe 5 or 6 miles in cross-section, enclosing an awful lot of space, but of course we'd have to have an entire ecosphere contained within. But we'd be in pretty good shape to go off and explore these Earth-like planets that we're looking for, that are orbiting around sun-like stars. Well, I think we have to settle cases here on the Earth first, and we have to learn to cooperate with one another and to stop this insanity of self-destruction. And one thing that Revelation tells us is that admission to the city was exclusive. You couldn't get on there if you were a thief, a liar, a murderer, a whoremonger. You'd have to be pretty spiritually adept to get up there. Because imagine, this is a society traveling off into space where everyone is going to have to depend on everyone else, and you don't want anybody starting some ruckus, planting seeds of dissent or jealousy or envy or all these other human failings that we demonstrate all too much. So that I would suggest that the inhabitants of the city of heaven would have to be Christ's. Now, part of the garble of Western religious dogma kind of garbles this Jesus and Christ character together, so that it seems like this is one unique being, that Jesus Christ is the only one, the only begotten Son of God, which is also kind of tangled up because that's the output from the Council of Nicaea back in May and June of 325 AD. And in one place, Jesus is begotten, and in another place, it's not begotten. So it's a wonder. If you really want to experience something, just talk to some Christian about what he believes, and you'll find it's pretty confused. Really confusing. But I claim to be a true Christian. Well, my authority for this is a gospel, not one of the usual four: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. No, this one is the gospel according to Walt Disney. Oh, I tell you, I bet you're scratching your heads right now. Well, you'll have, before your shoulder starts to look like a snow scene from collecting all the dandruff from all the head scratching, I'll bet you don't know what I'm talking about. There is a gospel of that kind, you know. And I'm sure you don't know what I'm talking about. So this is because you're searching your realities, all your experiences, everything you've seen, heard, thought, and I wouldn't be surprised that you have no idea what I'm talking about. Well, I'll tell you one thing though. It's I'm being a little bit disingenuous because it's not really the gospel according to Walt Disney. It's really the gospel according to Carlo Lorenzoni. It's almost as bad, isn't it? Well, the connection here is that Walt Disney made a feature-length film based on the gospel according to Carlo Lorenzoni. And just to help you along, I'll give you a little hint what I'm talking about. Ready? Here goes. Well, there's your cue. It's Pinocchio. Now, when I said that most people didn't know about the film, I didn't mean they didn't know about Pinocchio, because everybody knows and loves this lovely little children's story. The part they didn't know is that it is actually a gospel. It's the one true gospel because it expresses the true God, the true Christ message, which is simply to be one. Of course, the church has kind of garbled all that together, kind of muddling Jesus and Christ together, so they say that, well, it's Jesus is Christ and he's the only one, which is false on the face of it, because Joshua told his followers, your Father knows you have need of these things. If it was exclusive, he would have said, my Father knows you have need of these things, whatever they are. And the Beatitudes. Now he says at the end of the Beatitudes, why, go into your closet and close the door and say the Lord's Prayer, which, by the way, everybody says wrong. And the fault is that one little word. Everybody says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth. No. All you have to do is look at Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 through 12, and you'll see that it is thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth, which is our total personal experience on the material plane. In other words, Mother Earth. What are the first 5 letters of material? M-A-T-E-R, the Latin word for mother. And so we have this fictional character, Jesus, who is going to come back one of these days, because after all, you know, what we heard about God is God created everything, the whole world, put all kinds of people in it, and he's going to come back and destroy it, and he's going to send Jesus down here, and what's he going to have him do? Judge. The same guy that says, judge not, lest ye be judged. Doesn't that sound a little bit hypocritical? I think so, you know. Well, how's this for hypocrisy? Jesus says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's. So how come the churches don't pay taxes? Isn't that rendering unto Caesar? Oh, yeah, right. Well, I mean, let's not get confused with the facts, but back to Pinocchio. What is it that he wanted more than anything else in the whole world? To be a real boy. He starts out as a marionette, which is one of those puppets that dances on the end of a string. And when you look at organized religion and politics, isn't that the way they operate? They try to keep you like marionettes, puppets on a string, but there's always somebody up here pulling the strings. And I have to look at the conditions of the world today and wonder if maybe we're getting, maybe we haven't been getting the right skinny here. Well, anyway. Now, the New Age spirituality, which has been wonderfully described by Dr. Bruce Lipton, and I would encourage you to look him up on YouTube and watch some of his lectures, because he has successfully united spirituality and science. And that the old Newtonian system is thrown out because it's purely material, and now the new quantum system says that energy is all there is, and we're all part of that energy. And it all boils down to two things. We either grow toward love or grow toward fear. And it's the fear that makes everybody so sick. It's fear that will make you sick. And the whole world is sick. But you don't need me to tell you that. Well, Pinocchio, if you recall, was made of the materials of the earth. Wood, cloth, hair, probably porcelain for the eyeballs and all that. And he was created by a loving father, the toy maker. And he had a cricket who was his conscience, who kept trying to tell him the right things to do, but he didn't want to listen. And then there was the fairy godmother, which represents the guardian angel or the protector in the Great Spirit. And Pinocchio decides to have his equivalent of 40 days in the wilderness, and he goes off with a lamp wick, and he makes a jackass out of himself, ears and all, with the hee-haw, hee-haw. Then he goes out with the fox and the badger, you know, an actor's life for me, and he starts lying, and his nose gets bigger. Well, after all these misadventures, he ends up shipwrecked in the belly of a whale, and looks like his luck is pretty well run out. So he probably has something like a final judgment, just gives up and says, help. And he's transported back to his bed, in his little bed in his house, where he dies as the worldly creature and reawakens as a real boy, a true son of his father. Now that is one of the secrets of the ages. How the wise ones protected the truth from the tampering of fools. Now, there are many people that I have presented this argument to about becoming Christ. Because Christ is a spiritual condition. It's almost perfect humility, and it's allowing one to be guided by that spark of the divine, which is called the Father, but that's only a name. It's only a symbol. There's no real Father, just like there was never a woman named Necessity who had a baby named Invention. But whenever I would present this argument, and some of these Christians, folks who were kind of on the fence, and kind of look at me and say, are you sure about that? And I'd say, well, let's think about it another way. Suppose you wanted me to be your best friend. Well, would you want me to really be your best friend or just act like it? Emmett Fox talked about demonstrating, expressing some image that's different from what exists inside. That's hypocrisy. You can't keep up the act for very long. And I'm sure you've seen instances of that. So what do we mean by becoming Christ? Well, every day is Christmas. Yeah, really. Of course, I don't have the colored lights and the hymns and all this phony stuff about peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Well, the rest of the time, we have people like Billy Graham, who visited the White House in 1971 when Nixon was trying to wind down the Vietnam War, and suggested to King Richard that he drop an atomic bomb on Cambodia. Blessed are the peacemakers, right? Well, it turns out that you know not when your hour will come. Now that doesn't mean you're going to be swept away in the rapture or anything like that. What it's talking about is your final judgment. And it's not the horrific thing that Michelangelo plastered all over the altar wall of the Sistine Chapel when you got Jesus judging again. And what happens to the people that don't make the cut? They go to the fires of hell? Does that make sense to you? That Satan is going to punish you if you perform only evil and wickedness? Isn't that what he's encouraging you to do? Now suppose that you were, say, a 12-year-old kid and you want to be a gangster. And I'll be a mafia don. And I'll take a liking to you. And I'll say, you know, I can see to it that you make a lot of money and have a lot of power and influence. But you have to start off by doing everything I tell you. Now, what I want you to start doing is going around to all the bookmakers and all the numbers players and pick up the proceeds every day and bring it here. And don't take any. You know, you bring every penny of it back to me. And if you do that, of course, why? Say, you know, I think I can trust this guy. And then, hey, I tell you what, you've done enough. Been a bag man long enough. I think I'll get you into sales. How about that? Oh, yeah, I know. I'll have you go out to these little mom and pop grocery stores and dry cleaners and stuff like that, and you can sell protection. How's that sound? Oh, and you go out there and you do all kinds of business. I mean, you got the whole neighborhood sewed up. And I say, you know, boy, you started off with a bag man and you sold protection. Wow, hey, I'll get you into the labor unions. Let's see what you can do with those, with price fixing and all that. And boy, you passed that too. Well, hey, you know, I think it's time you got made. And then we'll have that little ritual where I hand you a gun, and now you're a member. And when anyone introduces you, he doesn't say, well, here's a friend of mine. Oh, he's a friend of ours. That means you're made. And now you're really on your way. And, well, you keep doing such a good job for me, and pretty soon I'll make you a couple. And that means you'll have your own little gang and your own rackets that you can run. But, of course, you still have to pay, you know, kick your share upstairs. Am I going to punish you for doing all that? Hell no. You keep doing what I want you to do, and I'll make you an underboss, and when I croak out, I'll even name you as my successor. So what's this Satan business all about? No, actually, the final judgment is something that I have personal experience with, because I was a bum. I was a criminal at one time. I abused everyone I met. I used to love things and use people. And my life was miserable. I'm a recovering alcoholic. And there used to be 6 pounds of paperwork back in New York somewhere to the effect that I was hopeless. And I had tried to kick that monkey off my back a long, long time. And finally, 32 and a half years ago, I came to my final judgment. I was so spiritually bankrupt, so depressed, so empty, that I finally cried out for help. And a bunch of people helped me out with some hope. They told me, oh, I'm not a bad person trying to get good. Just a sick person trying to get well. And I had to do an awful lot of self-examination, because I soon realized the drinking wasn't my problem, I was my problem. My attitude and outlook on life, my relations with people, it was hooray for me and fuck you. Oh, and I'm not afraid of words. I think it's just nice not to have to be afraid of words. Like, one of the things I think sounds really stupid is dog poo. Now, everybody knows you're talking about shit, so why not just say dog shit and get it over with? So anyway, if you think I'm the holy of all holies by claiming to be a true Christian, hey, forget it. A true Christian enjoys life. But there are 3 requirements. You have to be 3 persons in one. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who can't figure that out. Well, let me suggest a little scenario. Let's start with a little girl, a cute little girl who has parents. She starts off as a child, a daughter, and then at about 5 years old, she starts to learn things, either at school or hopefully at home. Homeschooling, you know. Well, then this little girl becomes a student. And if she has playmates, well, then she becomes a friend. She's still a little girl, still a daughter, still a student, and now she's a friend. Along about puberty, she starts to become a young woman. Well, she's still a daughter. She still has friends. She's probably still a student. How many persons do we have now? About 5? Oh, and then she gets married. Well, you can add spouse to that. Well, maybe she's not a student anymore. Now she's a spouse. And if they have children, well, then she's a parent. Well, the Christ is simpler than that. And every day is Christmas, because you know not when your hour will come to have Christ the King born in your heart. That is the final judgment. It's what we recovering alcoholics and drug addicts call hitting bottom. When you get to a point that's so low that there's only one direction possible, and that's up, unless you blow your brains out. And it's sometimes just that cut and dry. Take the pistol out of your ear and say, well, I can always do this, but maybe I missed something. Help me. And I haven't wanted a drink in 32 and a half years. And boy, has my life changed. And I learned the truth. I never had a bad day. I've had a bad attitude. I could carry a big bag full of grudges around for years. Not just a day, months, years. But I had to get it straight. I'm the problem. My attitude and outlook on life. So this required a degree of self-examination that I thought would be impossible, but one little thought at a time, one day at a time, one step at a time, I started to come into the sunlight. And I'm only inviting you to join me in the sunlight. And a good way to do that is to become a Christ. Now, the Christ, here all you have to do is be three things. You don't have to have 5 or 6 different roles to play, just 3. And those 3 are Messiah, Savior, and Redeemer. Well, Messiah is easy because a Messiah is a deliverer of a message. And there are good messiahs and there are not so good messiahs, depending on the message they deliver. Now, if my message to you quickens your spirit, lights up your soul, and raises your conscience, raises your mind to a higher level of consciousness, then I'm a good messiah. But I don't know that, because I don't know what's really going on in your secret place of the Most High, where only you and the Creator know what's happening. But I do my best, and I hope for the best. And even in Revelation, the Christ is depicted riding a white horse, and his name is stitched on his thighs. And I know you'll join me in hoping that he's wearing pants, because otherwise getting stitched, it might be kind of painful. But what that means is that I just keep doing what I do, hoping for the best, but I don't really know if I'm succeeding or not. Every time. Over the while, though, it does seem to turn out, because then I start hearing my own words being recited by others, and that's good. So, be a Messiah. And let your communication be yay, yay, nay, nay, because anything more is evil. It's just like when I was setting up this last clue. And I said, well, this is a gospel according to Walt Disney, and he made a feature film, and nobody knows about it. Of course people knew about the film, they just didn't know what the underlying message was. And the stupid people who have eyes that cannot see, ears that cannot hear, just looked at it and nothing registered. Why, it's just a cute little children's story. And now about the Savior. You'll have to agree with me that it's a whole lot easier to be a savior when you know who you're saving and what you're saving them from. Now, we've already discussed the tragic-comic nature of man, the higher, aspiring, virtuous, God-seeking, and the low, mean, base, violent old Adam. Well, suppose I did something that made you very, very angry. Wouldn't you, think about this, wouldn't you be suffering from an assault of your own lower nature? Because after all, it's you who are angry. Yep. Guess so. Guess I wasn't a very good Messiah that time. But now, instead of that, let's suppose that I always treat you with the same love, kindness, respect, dignity, consideration, charity, that I would have you treat me. Couldn't we say that I'm saving you from an assault of your own lower nature? Any questions? And now, Redeemer. Now that might be a kind of a tricky one here, and I know that everyone I've ever presented this argument to, when we get to Redeemer, I ask one question, and nobody gets it right. And the question is, on any given day, where are the greatest number of redemptions occurring? I get some wild guesses, but nobody gets it right. The answer is pawn shops. What is it? It's something of value, dollar value, of course, that's held in bondage against the payment of some kind. And then when you make the payment, whoop, no more bondage. Well, as far as I know, no one has ever placed a dollar value on a soul. But I'll bet you've met some souls, if you haven't even been one, that are in a spiritual bondage, grieving over some terrible loss, feeling isolated, alone, nothing's working. That's a soul in bondage. Well, what can you do to purchase that soul from bondage? Pay money? No, but hey, don't forget, time is money. Maybe you can spend time. Maybe you can say, oh, it looks like you're having a hard time. I'm not sure I understand what's going on with you, but I feel bad that you feel bad. I know you need a friend now, and gosh, I'll stay with you if you want me to. Because I care. And if you want to listen, I'll talk. If I'll talk, I'll listen. But I just don't like to see you this way. So, I'll just stay with you as long as you need me. Unless you send me away. If you send me away, I'll go. I don't really want to. And what happens? The majority of the time, these people start to express themselves in words. And when you express grief in words, it takes the bite out of it. It takes the power away from it. And then you watch the magic, the transformation, when they start arriving at the truth themselves. And when this happens, they say, thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being with me when I needed you. But I'm all right now. And they pick up their bed and they go on up the road. Isn't that bringing people back to life? You bet it is. So I'd like to invite you to join the fun. The only thing, if enough of us start doing this, chances are we could start having a world that's kind of nice to live in. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up now, but there's more about the Christ message, and I'm going to explore a different kind of fiction that is worldwide, and it serves the same purpose, and it's romantic, so please don't miss it. And in the meantime, have the best day ever. And don't worry, be happy.